Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Today, we'll be discussing the final proposal for the Maximum Import Capability Enhancements Initiative. My name is Isabella Nicosia, representing ISO Stakeholder Affairs, and I'll be facilitating the web conference today. I'm also joined on the line by our presenter, Catalin Mixa, our Senior Advisor Regional Transmission Engineer. And we also have Jeff Billington, Director of Transmission Infrastructure Planning, Milos Bocinek from Market and Infrastructure Planning, and Jordan Pena, Senior Counsel, on the line as well. The presentation, as well as the final proposal, have been posted to the initiative webpage, so they are out there for you to view. To navigate to that page, you can go to www.kiso.com, and then under the Stay Informed tab, you'll want to click on Stakeholder Initiatives, and then it will be listed on that main landing page, and you'll just click the hyperlink to take you to that initiative webpage. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. This call is being recorded. The recording is for informational and convenience purposes only, and any related transcription should not be reprinted without the ISO's permission. Today's meeting is structured to stimulate dialogue and engage different perspectives, and while we always welcome comments and feedback, just a reminder to please keep those friendly and professional and respectful. And then just lastly, please try and be brief and refrain from repeating what has already been said so that we can manage the time efficiently throughout today's call and address as many comments and questions as possible. So instructions for raising your hand to ask a question: if you connected to audio through your computer or use the Call Me option, then you'll raise your hand by selecting the raise hand icon, which is located right above the chat window. If you connected to audio separately and did not use the Call Me option, you'll need to press #2 to enter the question queue, and we'll reiterate those instructions when it's time for questions. If you do need any technical assistance during today's meeting, you can send a chat to the event producer. Just a reminder, though, to please state your name and affiliation or organization name before making your comment. And if you want to send a question through the chat, you're welcome to do that as well. You can either send it to myself, again, my name is Isabella Nicosia, or you can send it to all panelists. But again, just make sure to put your organization or affiliation name when you submit that question, and then I'll read it out to our panelists. So this slide here shows where we are at in the policy initiative stakeholder process. We're here at the final proposal under proposal development. And for the agenda today, we'll start off with introduction. We have a slide covering some references, and then also a slide covering the purpose of the stakeholder initiative. We'll discuss some of the comments we received on the draft final proposal, and then we'll move into our proposal topics. So we have improving transparency, inclusion of contractual data from non-CPUC jurisdictional LSCs into the policy portfolio, maximum import capability expansion requests, and the Step 13 give priority to existing RA contracts. And then we will discuss the tariff and reliability requirements BPM alignment of terms, and then we'll open it up at the end for stakeholder discussion and cover any topics or questions that we may have missed. And then we will wrap up with the initiative schedule. So with that, I will hand it over to Catalin Mixa, and we'll go ahead and get started with the introduction. And Catalin, just make sure you unmute yourself on WebEx.
Thank you very much, Isabella, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Just a reminder what maximum import capability it is and why we're here. So maximum import capability is a simultaneously deliverable amount of imports to the aggregate of load. It is getting tested along with internal generation, to make sure they're all deliverable at the same time. There's a single deliverability test, and all internal resources, including deliverability for export switches, get tested at the same time to make sure they all fit together and they're deliverable to the aggregate of load. We do calculate it yearly, and we do allocate it yearly, so there is a possibility now for anybody who signs long-term contracts to lock those at a branch group level based on our initiative from last year. Next slide, please. If you are new to the process, hopefully we don't have people to come right in the very last stakeholder call, but if you are new to the process, please go through these ISO tariff sections and BPM sections to familiarize yourself with what maximum import capability it is, how is it calculated, and how it's allocated. The purpose of this initiative was to explore and go through the stakeholder concerns and suggestions that you guys had in the last couple of years. Also, just to remind everybody that in order to get this done for our year 2023, we would need it to be effective by around February 1st. Originally, we wanted it to be effective by around June 1st because the import allocations get done in June, July, and August. But now, since we have introduced the MIC expansion request, we want this to be effective earlier in order to allow stakeholders to make expansion requests. And I will go in the details when I get to that section. So after the draft final proposal, we have received comments, about 7 sets of comments. Some of them were for multiple parties. And, the majority, actually an overwhelming majority of stakeholders had support for all the items we're moving forward with. Most of you had some concerns, mostly around the process for MIC expansion requests, and we're going to address that here. We're going to go through some details. So we do believe that we are making minimal changes to the draft final proposal, and I'm going to reiterate exactly what we change on each one of the items when we get there. And we do propose that we move forward with all the items as they were written down in the draft final proposal. Now, because we are aiming for the November board meeting, which is next month, actually it's early next month, it is not possible for us to take another round of written comments. But we do have your previous round of written comments, and we will take verbal comments today. So if you do have verbal comments today, please come in. I will stop after each one of the segments, and I will definitely take your comments in. So before I start going through the items, I think that's the next slide, Isabella. I will stop here and just take any general questions that you might have.
All right, and just a reminder, ladies and gentlemen, you can use the raise hand icon located in the top right-hand corner of the chat window to raise your hand in WebEx. And if you're dialed in phone only, using the 888 number, you can use #2. And of course, you're also free to put your messages in the chat and message all panelists. And I do not see any questions in the queue at this time.
Thank you very much. So the first item we have is improving transparency. We are moving forward with the same proposal as we had last time with only one augmentation. We received comments from stakeholders that the term of the allocation also needs to be displayed, and obviously the term needs to be displayed. So we added here the term. So you will see the owner of the MIC allocation by branch group, the megawatt quantity, the term they hold that, contact person, megawatts available for trade. You will see all of that. It will be visible on the outside web. There is no change to the second report that shows basically the RA showings. You will be seeing the total amount of MIC, also the total amount by POC jurisdictionals, the total amount by non-POC jurisdictionals, LSCs. So there is no change to the second bullet. There was one change on the first bullet item where we have added the term to make sure somebody might own the MIC allocations for the entire next year. Somebody has done a trade and maybe they only own the allocation for the month of August, let's say. So you will be able to tell if you search for MIC, you would be able to tell who owns it and what the term is for what months they own it. I don't think I have another slide for this one, Isabella. Do I have another slide? So no, but I would like to stop after each item. So let's go back one slide. If anybody has any questions or anything you wanna bring to our attention regarding improving transparency, please do it now.
I do not yet see anybody in the verbal question queue.
Thank you. Let's move to the next slide. So in here, as you all know, we found out that there is some discrepancies between the policy portfolio and the actual procurement that is occurring, especially with non-CPUC jurisdictional LSEs. And I think it's in everybody's best interest that going forward, the policy portfolio reflects as much as possible the actual contracts procured by non-CPUC jurisdictional LSEs. So in here, actually, I changed the very last bullet because we're moving forward with this item, so we'll have this opportunity, but it's not compulsory, so nobody's forced to show any data. And we will need a little bit more time to work with both the PUC and the non-PUC jurisdictionals to make sure the format we're getting this, it's the correct format the PUC can use. And also, we want to make sure that we mitigate confidentiality issues raised by some non-PUC jurisdictional entities. I would like for as much as possible to have an agreement between the two parties because I want this to be useful and I don't want to rush into it. So what we're doing is we're moving forward. We'll make sure that we can do this. Again, it's not compulsory, so the non-CPUC jurisdictionals will not be obligated to provide this data. But if they want to provide, there'll be an avenue to provide that. And we will continue to work with the non-PUC jurisdictional LSEs and with the PUC to make sure exactly in what that format it is. So I did have a few calls with the PUC, and they did inform me that, at least one non-PUC jurisdictional sent in the data, but it wasn't the data they expected it, so it wasn't very useful. So I want to make sure that, we understand exactly what PUC includes and what level in their portfolio development and what other stuff ISO might need to consider on our own, especially now that we are allowing expansion requests. So once we clarify all of that, at least we have an avenue where to provide this stuff, and we all can agree a little later exactly what the format it is. So we do propose that we move forward, allowing ISO to collect this data, and we would work on exactly the format and how to make this transition, or if we even need to make this transition to the PUC. So even though I'm saying here that we're going to work some more on the exact what the data it is, I believe that if we need a little more vague language when we file it for such that we allow this opportunity here. And of course, since we want most people to take advantage of this, we want to make sure that everybody buys in what the confidentiality rules are around that. Next slide, Isabella. Okay, so I think I finished that one item. So I would like anybody has any questions about that. I don't have too many details right now, but if you do have questions about this, I would be let's discuss them now. So please bring them forward.
All right, and I do not yet see any hands raised in the verbal question queue.
Okay, thank you. All right, the third item we'll be moving forward with is make expansion requests. So even though we haven't changed anything in this section, we did add clarification, and I added a lot of details about how this is going to work. So please allow me to go through this, and then if you have any questions, we'll take them at the end. So Again, we will be opening up for stakeholders that, have some contractual financial commitments towards serving ISO internal load to propose MIC expansion requests. Again, the request, these expansion requests, if they happen, they will be at the ratepayer expense, meaning we will be expanding MIC, we will not be expanding transmission, but we will be expanding MIC. Therefore, the LSCs have already paid for this. This is already paid by all the ratepayers. Transmission is already paid by ratepayers. So because of that, the person making a request is actually not convey any special rights. Scheduling rights, market rights, or MIC allocation rights, those all go the way they are currently in the tariff. All the transmission is paid by all the ratepayers, and all the allocation go in the same format as we have today. So just because you send in a request, it doesn't mean you will be getting the allocation to yourself. But what we want to make sure here is that we have enough MIC allocation in order to fit all the contracts and all the financial commitments that the people have. And then it's up, once we have that, then it's up to you to figure out how to get those allocations to yourself, maybe through trading, maybe to submitting requests in when the steps are the appropriate steps to the linear process. However that may work, it's okay as long as we have enough MIC at the branch groups where we already have financial commitments made up. So the request, you can submit the request, and we'll tell you when to submit the request, but the idea is that the request come in, and then we can give deliverability out whenever that is available. If it's available right in the first year, we'll give it out right in the first year, okay? If that deliverability for some reason is not available in the first year, but that deliverability becomes available 1 or 2 years later because we already have an approved transmission project that will increase MIC coming from those branch groups, then the MIC increase will show up, 2 years later whenever the transmission project shows up. I want to reiterate this point that if it's possible to give it out right in the first year, we'll give it out right in the first year. If it's not possible, we might have to wait a little bit until, the transmission that brings extra deliverability is in service. Next slide, please. So how is this all going to work? So basically, the stakeholders with legitimate reasons will be submitting MIC expansion requests in the comments to the draft transmission planning process study plan. So every year we have a study plan, usually comes out in February. So whenever that comes out, and you would be submitting a comment to that saying that, you believe the ISO doesn't have enough MIC for this branch group because some of your contracts are not accounted for, or some of your commitments are not accounted for, please don't submit for something that's already accounted for. So if it's already existing ETC, TOR, pre-RA commitment, and new use import commitment, if you already have those statuses, please don't submit it because, that we already know about those and they're all taken care of. But if you have something else that is not already committed, then please do submit a request. So what we're going to do is we're going to sum all the requests that are coming in by each branch groups. Then we're going to look at the policy portfolio to see from the same branch group how much the policy portfolio is calling for. So if we add up both the policy portfolio and these requests, and they're all less than the remaining import capability on that branch group, then we stop and we say there is enough, we don't need to expand, just use whatever is there. The idea here is that the remaining import capability, maybe I need to make a reminder here what remaining import capability it is. The remaining import capability is the part that's not locked today. So we have some parts that are locked with ETCs, TORs, pre-RA commitment, and new use import commitment. Those are all already locked. Remaining import capability is the part that is not locked on that branch group. So if you have a branch group when the unlocked part, let's say, is 1,000 megawatts, and we get the policy portfolio calls for 300, and all the stakeholder requests call for another 500, then we have an 800 total, and we already have 1,000 on that branch group. Then we're going to say it doesn't need to be increased. We already have enough. Please come in and get it anytime you want to. If somehow the summation of those two it's greater than remaining import capability, then an expansion is required. Let's move to the next slide, please. So when an expansion is required, the way we do expansion requests today, just for you to know, we're going to be modifying section 6.1.3.5 in the reliability requirements BPM. And the way expansions are done today, we basically calculate a prospective remaining import capability, meaning we want to see how much we need in the future, which would now be, because this is bigger than historical data, now would be the summation of policy and expansion requests. We're going to look at that. Then we're going to have an expanded mix, which meaning for the expanded mix, it's all the existing ETT, CRR, commitment, new use, plus this prospective remaining import capability, which will include the policy and the stakeholder expansions. We will sum all these up and we'll see, okay, so today, let's say this branch group calls for 2,000 megawatts, but once we add all this stuff up, now we require 2,500 megawatts. So we're going to plug in the next round of the cluster studies, which actually are right around June timeframe, because that's when we do the deliverability studies for the next year's NQC study. We're going to plug all this in and see if they fit. If they do fit, we're just going to increase MIC, and we're going to say, okay, MIC on this branch group now is 2,500 megawatts, and you're more than welcome to make requests on it. That's how the process is going to work. If we cannot increase it right immediately, then we'll have to wait until some transmission projects come in service 1 or 2 years later, and then we'll increase it at that point in time. The clarification that I want to make here is that the MIC expansion request by itself cannot justify a new transmission expansion. This is a request more often than not as one single LSE or one single entity. We will be willing to open that up for people to make requests and pay for studies and pay for upgrades, but that's not included here. Here we're only talking about ratepayer requests, and MIC expansion requests by themselves do not trigger a new transmission paid by all the ratepayers. This is just clarification, so we make sure that everybody is on the same page with that. Now, if a transmission is already triggered by some other reasons, like we already have a reliability need, or we have an economic need, or we have a policy need, and we already need to increase the transmission, then we're willing to add this item to make sure that we have enough import capability. At the end of the day, transmission doesn't come in small increments. It's usually bulky. So when it comes in, it usually brings in hundreds of thousands of megawatts at the same time. And we can make sure that along with all the other reasons it was approved, the transmission can also be added to mitigate these requests as well, to increase, basically the MIC can be increased to mitigate this expansion request as well. But on its own, just by itself, it's not going to be able to trigger a new transmission. Next slide, please. So here I have an example of a branch group and how this is going to work in the future. So, let's say we have a branch group. The current mix is 309. We have ETCs of about 50. We have pre-RA commitments of 120. We have new use commitments of 30. So, the total between those is 200 megawatts. So whatever is locked right now is 200 megawatts. So obviously the current remaining import capability, unlocked part, is 109 megawatts. So now we're looking forward and we see, okay, the portfolio calls for 500 megawatts and the stakeholder expansion request for an extra 100. So when we're going to get your request in hand here, we will be coordinated with the CPUC portfolio to make sure that the expansion request wasn't already included in the portfolio. So we're going to have to differentiate between which one is portfolio, which one is expansion request. But we'll go back and forth and we make sure there is no duplicate there. But in this case, let's say we need an extra 600 megawatts on top of the 500 megawatts the portfolio called for. So now the remaining import capability should be 1,100 megawatts. So currently it's 109. It should be 1,100. So the expanded MIC will be the higher of the two, which is 1100 plus everything that's required for the already locked pieces. So it will be that the existing 200 that was locked plus 1100 of expansion. So what we really need, we need a 1300 megawatts. This is what we're going to do. We're going to take this 1300 megawatts and we're going to plug them in the deliverability cases and see if we can accommodate 1300. If we can, that's great. If we cannot, then we'll have to figure out how much of that is available, and we will give that out. So let's say we plug 1,300 in, and we come up that only 800 is deliverable or 900 is deliverable. Okay, still more than what we had before, but not 1,300 is not possible right now. Then we will give the 1,800 or the 800. Sorry, we will increase to 800. So it's going to be a partial increase now, and maybe later, if we justify some more transmission, then we'll move beyond 800. When that new transmission comes in, it's going to be another piece that will move from 800 to 1,300. So this is how this is intended to work. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to be clear, if there is no transmission or there's no MIC whatsoever, and it's not possible, we don't have any transmission approved, then the request is denied. It's not possible to increase now, and it's not possible to increase later because we have no transmission that comes into service to increase the need. So in principle, if that's happening, is then the ISO by itself would be looking if we can expand the transmission, but we do have to have another need. This by itself won't be the driver. You will have to have reliability need, an economic need, a policy need. But if we can justify a need to increase, then we can move it forward with a TPP. We do agree that in principle, we could give that person that got denied a possibility to pay for studies and pay for upgrades and do all of that. But currently, we don't have a framework and process for that. And that particular part, customer paid for transmission studies and upgrades, is not moving forward part of this stakeholder initiative. We are willing to move forward with that in a different stakeholder initiative. And I can tell you right now that if and when we're going to be allowing for customer paid transmission upgrades, this would be added to that as well. Next slide, please. All right, let's just stop here. I already say I have one hand raised, but let's just go through the comments first. Thank you.
All right, moving to the first comment in the queue. Your line is being unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, Catalin. It is Chris Devin here from Customized Energy Solutions. So I had a few questions on this part of the proposal. Thanks for trying to provide some clarifications. Let's see. The first one I think would be maybe going back to slide 13, where we were talking about the concept of putting in a comment into the transmission planning process to ask for this. So when I was thinking about it and looking through the example, which I appreciate you providing the example in the slides, it was pretty helpful to try to understand a little bit better how the actual process that you would go through would work. But my question on this part is really, is it so much an option, or is it going to really actually kind of be an effective requirement that everybody tries to ask for what they, potentially have as a legitimate amount of need on those branch groups to kind of get the right outcome, I guess is my question, because it seems like there's a possibility here under this process where it's, if you have a legitimate reason to submit a MIC expansion, you might want to do that under the TPP. But if not for having, 4, 5, 6, 10, 20, however many other requests from other stakeholders also submitting a MIC expansion request, then you might not actually really get to the full amount that's actually needed, because some folks might just want to go into the allocation process under the normal, remaining import capability and try to get their pro rata load ratio share part out of it. So I guess my question really is if folks are interested in making sure that that particular branch group gets expanded to the maximum extent possible or necessary, should everybody be really striving to put in these comments in the transmission planning process every single year? And am I thinking about it right here, or any reaction at all to that, Callan? I'll stop there.
Yes, currently we're not making it a requirement. We're making this as an optional, but I would assume that maybe I'm a little naive here, but I would assume that people who actually have these financial commitments already made up, they would want to make sure that we have enough MIC and they would be submitting this. We're not making this a requirement, so you would have your option to submit the request in or not. If you believe, if you already look on the ISO website and you see that we have 2,000 megawatts of remaining import capability and not too many people are fighting for it, then maybe it's not required that you put your 50 megawatt contract there, since you're almost sure you're going to get it. But we are not making this as a requirement. We're making this as an option right now.
Okay, I guess my reaction to this would be that I see a couple issues that I think this really is going to maybe fall short of really resolving some of the solutions, because I think the timing of this, exactly when this has to be put in place, is probably before the normal MIC process. It's not really lined up very well, I think. So how are people going to know in advance to ask for this expanded MIC if they don't know how many other people are going to try to be getting that because of the branch group? It might not actually be the same pattern as the last prior year. Is it, Catalin? I mean, does that concern hold any water with you or no?
It doesn't much. So let me try to explain this.
Okay.
Just for everybody to know, the normal process is for you to get the maximum import capability in hand, and then go sign a contract, and if possible, lock it up for as long as you want to. As long as it meets those requirements that it can be locked up. That's the normal process. You as a low-term entity or anybody making contracts without having the maximum import capability in hand, you are taking a chance, quite a big chance sometimes, that there is no maximum import capability. So my advice to people is do not sign RA contracts first and try to get the mix expansion request. First, you should get your MIC allocations, and then you should sign an RA contract. Now, here, the idea is here that some people already made some financial commitments. They already made up by today. Some people already made financial commitments for one reason or another. They made a financial commitment. They took a high risk, and we are allowing them to make this expansion request. But that should not be the norm. The norm should be first, get your MIC allocations, then sign contract and lock them up on a multi-year basis.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess my reaction is that this doesn't seem to really solve very much of any issue then at that point. But fair enough. I know people ask for this option, so understood. I guess going back to slide 12, the other question I had on that slide was on the other stakeholders that can contractually demonstrate financial commitments towards serving ISO internal load. Does that have any more specific requirements around it, or is it just anybody that has a contract with an LSE, be it some other type of RA commitment or something that's not specified yet, or some other approach that would basically meet this? And is there any way that perhaps you guys could clarify that a little bit more in the tariff language?
Well, the idea when we wrote that bullet, the idea was that we currently don't know all the types of contracts that people are signing up there. I mean, I know there are RA contracts. I know some people are bidding transmission, but I don't know what else I'm going to find. So we were willing to open it up to anybody who can, justify that they do have a financial commitment to serve ISO load one way or another. Then we'll take a look at it. We specifically wanted to be a little bit more vague to see what else can be there. I mean, we can eliminate that bullet and it will be very easy for us, but we thought it's worthwhile leaving it there just so we can have an avenue to look at these requests.
Sure, and I do think we should try to be inclusive as much as possible, and wider to let more folks ask for this if it's reasonable for sure. I guess it's just a little bit concerning if it's not very well defined exactly what that may mean. It seems to me that this could open it up for basically just anybody that's an LSC inside of the CAISO VA to just ask for this expansion request at any time without having any kind of the actual commitment in place. And if so, maybe that is actually more helpful to kind of meeting that idea of, asking for an expansion in advance of actually signing the contracts, kind of to what we were discussing earlier. Is that something that you think would count or be a good use under this part of the definition?
That's not what it was intended for. So if that's what more specification required, then we will willing to put some more specification required. Anyway, just for everybody to know, is we will have, at least one more stakeholder call about the tariff language and draft BPM language. So we'll be going a little bit more details over there, but that's not what the section was intended for. That makes sense. To expand MIC on any branch group. That's just not what this for. Then we don't need the language if anybody can submit any request at any time. Okay, fair enough. So yeah, I think maybe during that next tariff language development call, I'll attend and see what we can do on that one. And then I'm sorry for all the questions, but I have one more, and then I'll stop. It's on when that clarification you made. I think it's on page 14, slide 14. On the sole need part here on number 3, where the MIC expansion request as a sole need cannot justify new transmission expansion paid for by all ratepayers. On this one, is there a way that you guys can clarify what would justify it? Is it just under this kind of standard DPP study process, so your economic-driven, policy-driven, or reliability-driven projects, and that there would have to be some need that would then be identified under those criteria? Am I thinking about that correct? That's correct. So currently, those are the 3 main types that we have. It's reliability, economic, or policy.
Okay. I think I'll stop for now. Maybe I'll come back in on the open discussion a little bit later with a few other thoughts and ideas, but I'll let other folks ask some questions now at this point. I've said too much, so thank you for the explanation, Catalin.
No problem. Thank you.
All right, moving on to the next caller in the queue. Your line is being unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, Catalin. It's Ellen Wolf from Reserve Consulting. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Ellen. Yes, we can hear you fine.
Okay, thanks. I had a few questions, and I'll pick up on this one that Chris just asked, just to make sure I'm understanding. I guess I get a little confused between the distinction of a sole need and the fact that you're going to look at the policy portfolios plus stakeholder expansion requests. So if some need didn't make it into the portfolio in some way and it's additive with the portfolio, then would you approve the transmission for it, even though strictly it wouldn't meet the policy upgrade requirement because it was something outside the portfolio?
Yeah, so the justification of need for the new transmission has to stand on the pillars that we have today, reliability, economic, or policy. So if those are triggered, then once we trigger the transmission, we're going to look to make sure that, the transmission is usually bulky. So we can make sure that, whatever proposed transmission solution we come up with will solve those and can be probably expanded to include this actual expansion request. But let's say we have a branch group where we have no reliability need, and there is policy 0 coming from that branch group, and the only thing that we have is this MIC expansion request, and that actually triggers. If we have available MIC, then we'll give it away. But let's say we don't have anything available, and that will trigger new transmission. So the MIC expansion request by itself, if we have no other need, you would not be triggering transmission paid by all the ratepayers.
But so wouldn't something that's additive with the policy portfolio by definition be of that type if it didn't already get triggered by the policy portfolios?
I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood the question. So the case I was trying to explain was there's no policy need. The policy need coming from that branch group is 0 megawatts. There is no need for a policy to expand that branch group. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I guess it's more of a definitional problem, but I'm afraid it's going to be a real problem too. If you're going to look at prospective RIC, and I'm looking at your slide 14 that you have up, the first item, you're going to look at prospective RIC based on the policy portfolios and expansion requests. But if the expansion requests have something in them that the policy portfolios didn't, then won't you end up, any transmission that gets triggered as a result of that would by definition be outside of a policy project, wouldn't it?
No, not necessarily.
Okay.
So let me give an example. So let's say I have a branch group where policy requests an increase of 1,000 megawatts, and I'm getting some other expansion requests worth another 200 megawatts. So let's say prospective RIC should be 1,200 megawatts, and we're on deliverability studies, and we prove we can only give out 500 megawatts. Well, 500 megawatts is not enough to meet the policy portfolio. So obviously we need an expansion, and that expansion is driven by the fact that we can't meet the policy portfolio, so we have to propose a transmission project upgrade. Policy portfolio really only need maybe like an extra 500 megawatts. Now, when we build a transmission, we can get 1,000 extra megawatts. So the MIC will be changed not to an extra 500, the MIC will be changed to an extra 700 because we want to make sure we meet the policy and the expansion request. And it's really no different in price because that transmission projects will bring close to 1,000 anyway.
Okay. All right. That's really helpful clarification. There was, I think, some clarification either in your most recent proposal or in your responses to the questions that were asked in response to the last proposal about a participant-funded study. And I gather that from this proposal, as you're describing it today, that anything that you would consider for CAISO funding, that the CAISO will just do the studies necessary, and that this participant-funded study isn't really relevant until we get to the participant-funded transmission project aspect of this, which you're not taking on now. Am I interpreting that correctly?
That is correct, and we're planning to move that. We have another stakeholder right now that deals with wheel-throughs. So if we are expanding it there for the wheel-throughs to pay for studies and upgrades, then we will be moving this part over there as well to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to pay for studies and pay for upgrades. If that's not moving forward in that stakeholder process, then we'll just have to open another one after that. But we just that process is so big and it requires so many things that it's not possible to finish in the time we have allowed here.
Okay, but for what you are proposing, then the CAISO will just conduct those studies as a course of normal business with the TPP and the GEDAP process, it sounds like.
That's correct. What we're proposing here is everything that's done here under this expansion request here. It's all ISO studies done by ISO, and everything is already paid by ratepayers. And you know that nothing that needs to be paid by customer. Everything that needs to be paid by customer alone will be moved to that new stakeholder process. Okay,
thanks. And then I had just one related question that came from the paper, and you didn't refer to it here, but I think it would fit into this spot. And it was on, I don't know if you have your proposal with you, but it was on page 26, and it said that the ISO may choose to move forward with these upgrades required to make the expansions, if it's either economic or reliability or policy. But you used the word may in there, and I wanted to just ask you to explain that a little bit more. Does that mean you might not?
Well, in all instances, once you do the studies, you have to look at cost, reliability, right away. You have to look at many other things. So normally it would trigger a transmission. I don't want to say that it's always possible to build a transmission wherever you want to. So the may was to convey that, it is possible. So if we do have reliability needs, if we see an economic benefit or it's required by policy, it will be moved forward. The question is it actually going to get done in the form you're proposing it or maybe some other form? But, we do intend to move forward if it fits the regular planning process, reliability, economic, policy.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions I had.
All right, moving to the next caller in the queue. The line is being unmuted. Please go ahead.
Sanjay, I cannot hear you.
Just a reminder to take your personal device off mute. All right, they may have stepped away. Moving on to the next person. Your line is being unmuted. Please go ahead.
Yeah, hi, this is Robbie Sankaran with Southwestern Power Group. And my question is just taking it a next step further from Ellen's questions. If a MIC expansion request comes in and it does trigger certain upgrades, it sounds like from that sentence you were just talking about on page 26 that the ISO may choose to move forward with the upgrades if the project is either economic or required to meet other reliability or policy reasons. So suppose that upgrade project is proven to has economic benefits to ratepayers. So it sounds like there is a possibility that an upgrade could occur that's triggered by a MIC expansion request that otherwise wouldn't occur in the case where that upgrade has economic benefits. Like, is that a true statement that there are outcomes possibly where the upgrades occur that otherwise wouldn't occur if it weren't for a MIC expansion request?
Well, see, okay, so let's say we do the study and then actually it is economic to build the transmission. And when I say it's economic to all ratepayers. So maybe we wouldn't catch it before if we didn't get this expansion request, but the fact that it is economic is actually good to all the ratepayers. So we will be moving forward with it. The fact that we didn't realize it was economic until actually we had to do the studies because this request came in. It's kind of an after the fact. It doesn't really matter how we found out and why we found out. We did the study and we have proof that it is, economic for all the ratepayers, then it makes sense to move forward with it, even if the request would have not come in. So the idea is that even if we wouldn't get this request, we still economic for the ratepayers, so we should move forward with it. The fact that we just caught it because of this request, it's kind of collateral.
Okay, you're saying, so yes, it's possible you would catch it or you would notice it because of the request that came in.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's really the only question. The other questions were covered by the other callers.
Thank you, Ravi.
Yep.
All right, moving to the next caller. Your line is being unmuted. Please go ahead.
Hi, this is Carrie Bentley with the Western Power Trading Forum. A quick follow-up on Robbie's question. Are you going to study all the MIC expansion requests? I know, for example, if you put in an economic request, the CAISO chooses just a subset of the requests that come in.
Yeah, so given that we did put the condition that people must have some financial commitments on serving the load, I think we would be looking at all of them. So we will be going through all of them and doing this analysis and seeing if we need to expand or not first. And then if we do need to expand, then we have to put them in the deliverability study. At this point in time, I'm saying that, yes, we will look at all of them and we'll test all of them.
Okay, thanks. In that response, you said that there's some financial investment. Is that only on the load side, or could that be on the developer side as well?
Yeah, we did open it up for the developer side as well. I believe it was open to people who are building transmission. I guess if you're just building a generator in Arizona and you don't have a contract with anybody in the ISO, that is not a good. We won't consider that a valid argument. But if you are building, a transmission, you're committed to, to serving ISO load on that transmission, then it's much more financial commitment than a generator who can sell to load in Arizona or New Mexico and doesn't have to come this way.
Okay, thanks. That's helpful. And I'm sure that'll all be in the BPM eventually in detail, or will that be in the tariff?
Yeah, we'll be working on that in the next call, both tariff and BPM, and we'll discuss some more where it will fit. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So thanks for that follow-up. My main question was, you said that on the slide, the justification for new transmission and then being able to pay for it, developer finance transmission, will be moved to the wheeling initiative. I'm assuming, are you talking about the external load and scheduling rights initiative?
Yes.
And then will that be, you said maybe, and I'm guessing that's because the scope, there's only been an issue paper put out. Were you imagining that would be in phase 1 or phase 2?
If that stakeholder process move forward with the customer paid, then this would be included there on whatever phase they're going to be using it for their own benefit.
Okay, and then do you know kind of time frame for when we'll know whether they're moved forward with that? Because I don't see that explicitly in the scope. I see the developing a forward transmission reservation process to establish scheduling priority, but that's different than customer-funded transmission upgrades. So I'm having trouble connecting the two.
Yeah, so Carrie, my 2 cents on that is that if there's only an issue paper out, but if and when they're coming out with a straw proposal and they're going through the rest of the proposals, if it will be allowed for outside parties to pay for this, then this would be moved over there. If they're not allowing that at all, then it will have to be a separate stakeholder meeting in next year or the following years.
Hey,
okay,
Catalin,
so you're
going to jump in here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, Milos, go ahead.
Hey, Gary. So as part of phase 2 of that initiative, we've outlined that part of the scope is developing an expansion process to allow requests to seek essentially scheduling priority across a longer-term time frame, which includes this aspect of studying particular requests for service that are longer in duration. And we would scope this item in. It wouldn't be just necessarily applicable to wheels, but it's the larger process for external needs or even internal needs, driving upgrades, stakeholder-funded upgrades.
Okay, great. That's helpful. That's phase 2. And then is that still expected to begin at the end of December of this year?
Right. We're targeting having a straw proposal on that phase 2 towards that end of part of December.
Okay. If we have specific comments on that aspect, should we submit that into this initiative, or should I be submitting that into the external load and scheduling rights initiative?
There you might be submitted into that process. Maybe you can note it here as well that that you're expecting this issue be addressed and you understand it's going to be addressed in the other initiative, but more specific comments would be in that other external load forward scheduling rights initiative.
Okay. Thank you both.
All right. I do not think we have any questions in the verbal queue, but we do have a question in the chat.
Yeah, let me read out the chat question. It's from Sanjay. Could you clarify how deliverability is determined in the TPP policy study? When there are common transmission constraints for MIC expansion and new generation in the generation interconnection queue, who gets the available deliverability?
Yes, thank you, Sandra. So our intention is to queue this request in. So basically their requests are coming in, let's say they're coming in next February. So while we were starting them, immediately to see if there's any deliverability available for next year. If there is any available, we can give it out as an interim, just like we're giving interim deliverability to resources that are later in the queue process. So, cluster 13 may get interim deliverability because some clusters 7 or 8 or 9 are not in service yet. We intend to do the same here. So if deliverability is available, we're giving out for next year. But the queuing of these requests will have to be coordinated with the generation interconnection process, and they'll be queued in whenever we receive these requests.
Thanks, Catalin. I'm not seeing any other questions.
Okay, so I hope I gave everybody more details about how that process is going to work. And since I think that was the biggest request we got in the draft straw proposal, please give us details how that is going to work. So hopefully we addressed everything you have. Carrie, I know you were planning to submit comments. Just want to bring this up now before I forget about it. We do take comments verbally to this final proposal right here. We are not taking any more written comments. The changes that we made from the draft final proposal are very small and rather insignificant, and we need to go to the board in November, so the board docs are due this week. So there's no time to have another round of written comments. We do have your written comments from the previous one, and if you do have some verbal comments, we would appreciate them now, because I'm jotting them down here on a piece of paper, but that we would not have another possibility to do written comments on this particular stakeholder process. But, we were willing to take your comments, especially Carrie, the one you wanted to comment on the other stakeholder process that Milos is running. And I see Carrie has her hand raised, so go ahead, Carrie.
Hi, can you hear me? Is that on? Carrie?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. I'm wondering, so when you guys go to the board and you put different positions down, are you going to put the positions from the last comment set?
Yes, unless you are telling us right now that you have something different for us, then we can jot it down. But we intend to take the positions from what people commented us from the draft final proposal.
Do you mean the revised? Because this is the draft final proposal now, right? So you mean you're going to take it from the last set?
Yeah, from the last set. The last set was the draft final proposal. This is the final proposal right here.
The final proposal. Okay. All right, I'm with you now. All right. I will shoot you an email. How about that?
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Right. Thanks.
Okay, the fourth item we're moving forward with is to give priority to existing RA contract doing step 13. Just to remind everybody what step 13 is, we have 13 steps to allocate maximum input capability for next year. Step 13 is the very last step and usually has the leftovers, whatever people are not usually fighting for. You'll go through about 3 rounds, and this is what's left in round 13. In round 13, anybody on step 13, third round, step 13, anybody can request to get megawatts for whatever it's leftovers. So in here, what we're going to do is we're going to give same-day priority. Usually when we get this request out, just for everybody to understand how this works, we tell people, okay, step 13 is going to get done on August 22nd at 8 a.m., and we usually get this request literally at 8 a.m., sometimes within seconds and cycles, and so we get this request because it's first come, first served. We're going to give priorities on that same day. So you don't have to stress if you have an RA contract left on a branch group, on a branch group that is actually left, then we have megawatts left over. You will get priority as long as you submit it on that day. We don't want to drag the process out too long, but as long as you submit it anytime that day, you will have a priority. We usually go and get these done the next day. So we'll take everything that we have, and you'll get priority on that branch group over any other request. So that's what same day priority means. You do need to submit it on that day. You can't wait, to submit it a few days later, because that MIC will be gone by a few days later. If we do have more than one LSE with contracts on that branch group, then the split will be done on a ratio between what's available and what's requested. There was an overwhelming stakeholder agreement that this is how we should move forward. So, in case it wasn't clear before, it should be clear now. The split will be done on megawatts available versus megawatts requested. Anybody has any questions or comments about giving RA priority in step 13?
Do not have any questions in the queue at this time.
Thank you. We also gonna clean up the tariff and BPM. We're gonna align the terms with the current practice. Two things that we found out that we're definitely gonna clean is it looks like the tariff may specify in one place that the trading is done on megawatt increments. That's actually not the current practice. Everything in RA is done with 2 decimals. All the requirements, all the showings, all the trading, everything is done with 2 decimals. So we're going to update that. We're going to clarify that. Also, we found out that the tariff actually specified that the ISO is just sending data to FERC based on trading data to FERC. But actually, we're not doing that. The data is being public from year one. We actually published that data because we thought that everybody wants to see that data. So all the data that FERC required for is actually publicly posted. And we will continue to publicly post that data. We're just making clarification in the tariff that this data is not directly sent to FERC, but is actually published on the outside web, and anybody can take it, including FERC. So that's the clarification. There's the 2 main clarifications we found on those sections. Does anybody has any questions regarding the alignment of terms?
We have no questions in the verbal queue at this time.
Okay, thank you. So I'm just going to open it up again for general discussions or clarification on anything anybody wants to talk about. I already see Chris's hand up, so let's start with Chris.
All right, Chris, your line is being unmuted. Please go ahead.
All right, thanks. Chris Devin again, CES. So I'll start off with a softball one, and then maybe let some other folks join in. But the first thing I wanted to suggest here is that I thought, Catalin, you guys did a good job on describing the whole deliverability process and how it kind of interrelates with the MIC and the normal internal resources. And that question that Catalin was at, or that Sanjay was asking you, Catalin, earlier, I thought that was really helpful. Is there a way that you guys would consider taking that information that's included in these straw proposals that you guys did for that whole educational piece of that and putting it into a separate document of its own and then posting that on the reliability requirements page, like as a kind of deliverability informational FAQ document or something along those lines, so that it's kind of memorialized and easy to find without having to dig into these stakeholder papers.
Thank you for the suggestion, Chris. I jotted down here. We'll think of a way to improve the explanation. Either maybe we put a little more language in the BPM to explain exactly how this is working, or we'll find some place for it.
Yeah, actually, if you did just take basically that section from the paper, which wasn't really that long, and put that in there maybe as an informational piece in the BPM, that might be really helpful. So that could work for sure. I was thinking maybe just as some other type of training documentation or something where it's just a reference guide to how it's done, similar to some of the stuff that's up on the transmission planning process page. I thought that might be useful, but either way, it's just a suggestion. But I found it very helpful, and I think it's one area where a lot of folks don't necessarily follow very closely or understand some of the technical details that was better explained by that than really anywhere else I had seen previously. So I definitely encourage that. But I have some other thoughts on a couple other things maybe just to discuss, but I'll stop here or see if there's anyone else that wants to chime in with other questions on other topics. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Not seeing any others, so we can go back to Chris.
All righty, Chris. Line is unmuted again. Please go ahead.
Okay. So I know I've been saying a lot on this call, but I just wanted to try to dig in a little bit more on a couple things that I was thinking of previously in these discussions on a couple of the slides. On the one for the inclusion of contractual data from the non-CPUC jurisdictional LLCs, I think that was back on slide 11. I was just curious about how you're thinking about this as far as the actual TPP portfolio goes. And one of the things I was wondering is basically, is this really only going to be used in the policy portfolio that's used only for studying the MIC-related expansions, or could this information also be kind of rolled into the overall TPP, preferred portfolio that actually could upgrade the transmission, beyond just under this MIC expansion type of a process potentially?
Yeah, so the intention here was to include it in the policy portfolio, which is the second one I believe you talked about. So the intention of this bullet is to include the non-PUC jurisdictional data into that main policy portfolio, which would be different than the expansion request that we are allowing now.
Okay. So then this could potentially be used to identify upgrades that were needed, outside of just those MIC expansion requests themselves.
That's correct.
Okay, I think that's a good approach. And then I guess as part of that, I was wondering how, if CAISO talked with the CPUC, if they could somehow reflect those things in their IRP planning, or if they need to, or if there's been any kind of coordination on that. I don't know if they really need to incorporate those into the IRP portfolio, but I think they'd always try to maintain consistency. So if CAISO is adding those to the policy, type of portfolio that's being used for the TPP study process, and that need to also somehow be incorporated into that IRP portfolio and lined up and aligned there. If you have any thoughts on that, I'd be interested.
That was the intention, Chris. That was the intention of this second bullet, to make sure that we are fine-tuning that PUC main portfolio which I believe is the same one, the one you're talking about now.
Yeah, it is. Okay, that's good. That's helpful. I think that's important because there could be some of these type of resources that come in that really help meet some of the policy goals, and then maybe the IRP portfolio doesn't need to require as much from other resources from other jurisdictional LOCs or something along those lines. So that was my kind of the thrust of my comment on that one. Okay, and then the other comment or I guess just discussion I wanted to try to get into a little bit more to try to understand this better is under the whole MIC expansion request thing. Again, I know I hit on a lot of stuff there, but I guess on looking at basically the slide 15 where you had that nice example that you guys provided, and I was trying to work through in my head my potential concern that I was asking about earlier, and I just wanted to maybe try to expand on that discussion a little bit more, kind of by saying or asking, I guess, or putting out a hypothetical, potential outcome here or scenario where this example, as you laid it out with these numbers, it seems to make sense to me. But I'm just curious if that concern I was raising earlier about everybody needing to make sure that they come in with a request to even get this extra expanded MIC, and then basically having that additional MIC then be allocated out to everyone else doesn't guarantee that those people that requested it even can get that MIC, and they have to go through that whole process that you described earlier about, potentially trading for it or buying it from someone else, that sort of thing. So I guess it's kind of strange, or it still seems like there's a bit of that chicken and egg problem here, even with this whole change proposal or proposed solution here, because it seems like there could be a potential where the people are doing contracting don't have the actual contract in place yet, so then they can't come in and ask for this expanded MIC. And then if they somehow even are allowed to, then they can't actually maybe get that locked down unless they go through the normal allocation process and do that trading and stuff. And then it seems like there's potential that there's so many LSCs that need to ask for a request on a particular branch group, but maybe won't know in advance that they need to ask for that there's this kind of chicken and egg problem that's going to come out of this, or it really maybe seems like it won't actually identify very many upgrades unless a bunch of people ask for it on the exact same branch group, and then that might actually trigger this. So, and I know it's hard to maybe respond. This is just hypothetical, but I'm just trying to work through, what is actually going to happen in reality when this actually is in place, and is it going to create some incentives for like a bunch of people to come in and ask for this, or is it really not going to have very much effect at all? And that's it. So I'm just trying to understand maybe that a little bit more. I don't know. I'm not asking a very good question here. I apologize, Catalin. But any reaction to that rambling?
It's okay. My only reaction to the rambling is that it's not really a chicken and egg thing. If you should not be putting your company at risk, and you should not be signing these contracts unless you actually have MIC. But if you did already sign and you already have some, financial commitments that you already made up, we are willing to entertain them. Again, you're going to study them, and you're taking a big chance that deliverability may or may not be available from the branch group you want to, and then you have signed a contract and it's not useful whatsoever. So here we do have an opportunity for people to request this in case they made this financial commitment without being aware that MIC is binding, or maybe MIC has changed since they made that request. MIC has gone down. That can happen too. From time to time, MIC goes down. And so here they want to ask for it to go back up the way it was before. So there's a few good things about it, but to us, the process that should be working is first you get your MIC and then you sign a contract. If you're doing the other way around, you are taking a big chance.
Okay, and I guess this solution does maybe give a little bit more flexibility and like leeway to help in those situations. But I hear what you're saying, that really shouldn't be the go-to way to do things, and that is different than the traditional get your MIC and go get your contracts and I just think for the longer term stuff, it would be helpful, but some of this change might be helpful. So I guess just to finish my questioning on this part of the proposal, I would just say, is it going to happen every year where they keep asking for this, or if they get the expanded MIC on that branch group, is that going to translate into the next year, or are they going to have to do this again the following year potentially?
Yeah, so it will be very clear from the people who are submitting these things for how long they have the financial commitment. So I would expect that, once they submit it and if we got the MIC expanded already, they don't have to resubmit it again over and over again. That's no point for that. I guess if there is no MIC available and you still have the financial commitment next year, you can ask for it again. I'm just not sure. Basically, once we look at it, we're going to tell you it's available or it's not, and if it's not, would it be made available in a few years or not. So once we're going to know all of that, I'm not sure the value of asking over year after year it would be, but it might be faster way for us to say no if we already done the study the year before that. I'm not saying no, you're going to be precluded. If you submitted once, you're going to be precluded from submitting next year. I don't want to say that either. And maybe in the meantime we'll approve some more transmission or something. But the idea is that yes, please submit them over, and you're not precluded from submitting it next year if you got denied this year.
Okay, that all seems to make sense to me too. That's logical. I would agree with that approach, but I just wanted to make sure for my understanding's sake. So I think that's pretty much it on that topic. And then the last thing I'll kind of just opine on here and then wrap up my input today is just to say that, I think everyone appreciates the attempt to make some changes here, and some of the stuff is going to be really helpful, particularly that transparency stuff, I think. So it's certainly appreciated work here. But I do also think that a lot of these issues still probably remain unsolved, things like the potential for hoarding of MIC and just the efficient utilization of the MIC overall, and facilitating multi-year contracts and the ability for folks that really have a specific request to increase and upgrade on the system just so that they can help deliver our imports and things like that really should probably be more considered further in the future, and I think that should all really be part of the discussions under that external load port scheduling right process, and I encourage TISA to open up another MIC coordination type initiative in the future, potentially as they continue to develop that external load port scheduling rights phase 2 proposal that Milos was explaining earlier, because I think if there are transmission service reservations and things that could maybe obviate the need for MIC, or somehow change this whole paradigm so that it's more about transmission service requests, and maybe somehow allowing that process to incorporate those and coordinate that so that there's a way that people can just ask for these type of increases to ensure they can do multi-year RA contracting. That may solve a lot of these problems that we've been kind of talking about for years and years and years under these processes. So that's just more of a potential future thing to consider, and just suggestion to keep that coordination open with that process that I think is going to change a lot for how things are done with the transmission service provision and how that interrelates with MIC and CRRs and other things. So that's just my soapboxing for now, and I will stop with all that. But thank you guys for hearing me out today. I appreciate it, and appreciate all the explanations, Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. Anybody else?
Any additional questions in the queue at this time?
Thank you. Isabella, I think I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Catalina. So we'll wrap up here with the initiative schedule. Again, we are not taking written comments on this call, so thank you all for your verbal comments today. We are targeting the Board of Governors meeting on November 3rd and 4th, and then we will file at FERC following board approval. Before we do that we will hold some more stakeholder calls related to the tariff and BPM language. So once we schedule those will be confirmed through a notice in the daily briefing. And then here is our last slide before we wrap up. If you aren't aware already, the ISO did recently launch its Energy Matters blog. It does provide timely insights to the ISO grid and market operations, as well as some other industry-related news. We've highlighted a recent article here on this slide. If you click the image, it will take you to the article to check it out. And then we've also provided a link here on this slide for you to subscribe to the Energy Matters blog monthly summary. So I will open it up here for any last questions before we conclude. So again, if you have a question, you can raise your hand by clicking the raise hand icon above the chat window. If you connected to audio separately, you can do so by pressing #2. Okay, seeing none, that concludes today's stakeholder call. Thank you all for your participation and have a great rest of your day.